We're about to go down a list of 5 of the biggest media hoaxes. And as I go down this list, I'm just going to spend a couple minutes on each of them. I want you to remember how huge each and every one of these stories was at the time it happened, and how much the media insisted you agree with their narrative. If you even ventured onto social media and said something opposite of what the media was selling you, you would get destroyed by everybody, possibly banned on social media. In every single one of these stories, it turns out the system lied through their teeth about it. Think about that. Let's start with number 5, January 6th. What did the system tell you on January 6th? Oh, you remember, right? Internet videos all over the place. I'm getting texts from family members. I still remember them on this day. They stormed the Capitol. What's happening? And what were the words? What were the words the media used time and time and time again? Insurrection, coup, 5 people murdered. You remember this, right? And look, obviously you can roll your eyes at these kind of words now because as more facts come out, the more ridiculous it all seems. But I want you to remember, what was it like on that day? Because I remember. And you know what I remember? I remember over 90% of the right. Set aside the system. Set aside the left. I remember over 90% of the right insisting that this was the darkest day in American history. This was an insurrection. This was a violent coup. The people have been murdered. And that's the problem. All of it turned out to be crap. It all turned out to be crap. Here, by the way, just to refresh your memory, just so you don't have to remember all of it, here's what all the commentators were saying on that day.
I've read that you don't believe this was a spontaneous riot that just sort of ran amok. You think that, what, they had inside help?
I do believe there was some inside assistance.
Yes. Somebody on the inside of those buildings were complicit in this.
There is no doubt in my mind that there were people inside the Capitol, inside law enforcement, perhaps even other members of the other side that may have been involved in this.
There was a sense that something was wrong. And obviously with the violence, but there was a sense that something was wrong from the inside.
And so I do think we owe it to the American people to understand, whether members of our own houses were working with these protesters.
Not only an insurrection and a coup, it was an inside job. Did you hear? It was an inside job. Other members of Congress, even the cops were in on it too. They all collaborated on this gigantic coup to overturn an election and bring down the government. It just turned out to be a bunch of people who wandered onto the House floor. The videos we're looking at now, looks like half of them thought they were welcome there. And of course there were some idiots, but... And remember, Officer Sicknick, the media will take any opportunity it can to trash cops. We'll get to that in a moment, but remember, it seems like it was, just yesterday, every single cop was a white supremacist, racist scumbag out there hunting down black men for the color of their skin. Defund the police. Right up until the point they thought they could blame the death of an officer on Republicans, and then he became a lion, a saint. Well, we were told over and over and over again that Sicknick was killed by the Trump supporters who stormed the Capitol in an insurrection. I mean, that's what we were told.
Officer Brian Sicknick, he died from injuries after being struck in the head by a fire extinguisher during the storming of the Capitol.
Officer Sicknick, who was, killed, murdered there by the mob.
The murder of Officer Brian Sicknick by Trump supporters.
These Republicans, they really don't care what the facts are. They don't care about the cop killers.
Cop killers.
Cop killers. Cop killers. Trump. Cop killers. Cop killers. Trump. Cop killers. Cop killers. Cop killers. Trump cop killers.
Man, didn't you hear? Officer Sicknick was murdered by those Trump supporters. According to everybody. Except for, the medical examiner. Yeah, that guy says it was natural causes and died of natural causes the next day, by the way, not January 6th. Now, this was not some celebration of January 6th, clearly not our final hour, but let's stop lying about this. One person was shot and killed that day, and she was shot and killed by a Capitol Police officer whose name has still not been released to the public. Let's move on. I haven't forgotten, nor have I forgiven what happened to Brett Kavanaugh. And this is not some defense of Brett Kavanaugh and his performance since he got to the Supreme Court. But don't you remember? Don't you remember? Brett Kavanaugh, he appeared to be honestly so clean and frankly nerdy. It was alarming. I mean, what kind of a dork keeps his high school schedule on? So he kept his high school schedule on one of those desk calendars. He appears to be just a big nerd. I mean, as clean as the day is long. And then we start getting whispers about assault and Christine Blasey Ford says he assaulted her and whatnot. And then the system decided Brett Kavanaugh was an alcoholic gang rapist.
I believe Professor Ford. I think she's credible, and I think when the investigation is finished and when she testifies and Judge Kavanaugh testifies, I think a majority of senators will find her credible.
She told her husband, this is a trauma she's been dealing with her whole life. She doesn't want to be in a bedroom that doesn't have two doors.
And it's going to be about listening to what each party has to say, but I believe her.
Do you believe her story?
Well, I can tell you it really does have a ring of truth to it.
A ring of truth. Haven't you heard? That's all that's necessary. Someone comes forward. Of course, in Christine Blasey Ford's case, she didn't remember anything. Who was there, how she got there, how she left the house. Didn't remember anything, except she was sure it was Brett Kavanaugh. But look, it had a ring of truth, right? And it went well beyond just the politicians you saw there. Media outlet after media outlet, TV, print, online, you name it. They decided that this nerd was instead of a squeaky clean, academic, was an alcoholic gang rapist and destroyed his reputation nationally. Half this country, to this day, you bring up Brett Kavanaugh, that's what they think about it. Of course, I mean, we do have this little headline from the AP after the fact, noting that multiple Kavanaugh accusers come out after and admit they made up the whole thing. But there was a while there, and again, I want to stress this point, even people on the right, many of them said, it does look bad. Let's just give in. Oh, it doesn't stop there. That was only number 4. Number 3, St. George Floyd. Now, I'm not here to discuss the details of this. George Floyd died. The officer was already put on trial. Officer Chauvin was already put on trial and found guilty, and now he's in prison. That's the way that goes. But I remember what happened in the wake of George Floyd's death, and I remember it very, very well. I remember that the entire system, again, including about 90% of the Republican Party, decided on a narrative because of a bad internet video in a situation no one knew the details on. Nobody. We watched a bad internet video and everybody decided that America was still the deep south of the 1950s and law enforcement universally was out patrolling the streets hunting for a black man to take down. Time after time after time after time, cities burned. We had idiot losers like that Senator Lankford, the Republican out of Oklahoma, talking about, wow, we really should change the name of military bases. We don't want to offend anyone. Everybody and their brother out there trying to be the king of the not racists. And of course, here's attorney Ben Crump.
It was not the coronavirus pandemic that killed George Floyd. I want to make it clear on the record. Will Packard, it was that other pandemic that we're far too familiar with in America, that pandemic of racism and discrimination that killed George Floyd.
Racism and discrimination. I'm not trying to make Derek Chauvin or George Floyd out to be sympathetic figures. Frankly, I never really cared about either of them. But I will say this. Derek Chauvin, the officer who's since been convicted of that death, he had his entire life ripped apart by every single reporter in the United States of America. Every single one. Because, of course, he was public enemy number one. Do you know how much racism they found in his background? I mean, they talked to his ex-girlfriends. They talked to everybody, every social media post, everything. You know how much racism they found? 0. Wrap your mind around that. Wrap your mind around all the death and destruction and misery that was spread after that. They have no idea that it was race-based at all. Even the current president of the United States of America had to jump on and had this to say.
Those 8 minutes and 46 seconds that took George Floyd's life opened the eyes of millions of Americans and millions of people around all over the world. It was the knee on the neck of justice, and it wouldn't be forgotten.
Knee on the neck of justice. Pour that gasoline on the fire, Mr. President. Oh, but that's only number 3. Let's move on to number 2. This one will bring back some memories. You see, Hillary Clinton was supposed to walk all over Donald Trump and coast to her election win. She just was. There's this vulgar barbarian saying uncomfortable things about the border, and of course we have Saint Hillary. She was Secretary of State and a senator, and her last name's Clinton. This should be a walk in the park. Hillary loses, of course. That was a great night. Hillary loses and immediately runs with Russia helped Trump win the election. Well, the media, they couldn't wrap their minds around a world where Donald Trump won either, so they immediately pile on. And of course it was Russia. It was Russia. We have all these headlines. There's a secret server. It's Russia, Russia, Russia. Did you know that Trump's a Russian agent? He's in the pocket of Putin. And Hillary Clinton and the system ran with this time and time and time again. And of course, Republicans who lack a, what's that word? Oh, a spine, promptly decided, you know what? We need a special prosecutor to find out if this is the truth. Is Trump really might be a Russian agent? I'm uncomfortable. The media says he is. And soon we have Robert Mueller ripping apart everything in Trump's life for 2 years to investigate this entire thing. And the media insisting time and time and time and time again that he's a Russian agent and Russian this and Russian that. And at the end of it all, nothing. Absolutely nothing. Oh, and I should mention before I move on to number 1 here, it is important for you to remember this. It is important for you to remember this. Robert Mueller, I had Republicans time and time again insist to me that he's just a civil servant out there doing good for America. He's not some partisan man. Robert Mueller, he knew 1 year into the investigation that Trump didn't collude with Russia. And instead of issuing a public, statement saying that, chose to keep it quiet until after the midterm elections where the Democrats took back the House. But I was told it's just a humble civil servant, right? And last, certainly not least, coronavirus. Oh, I know you remember. I remember a lot about coronavirus. I remember being one of the only ones on day 1 when someone suggested a lockdown saying, "Are you out of your mind? We don't even know what this is. You don't stop an economy ever. Let's deal with it as it goes. This is a bad idea. Don't do this." And you know what the entire system told you? The entire system. 99% of the Republicans and everyone else, what did they tell you? Well, they all told you this.
What you're talking about is our 15 days to stop the spread initiative. If we can get America to all pitch in for the next 15 days, we can flatten the curve, which is a term that you've been hearing a lot, not overwhelm our healthcare systems.
That's a surge of cases, so you need to stretch it out.
Self-quarantine for 14 days.
Stay at home as much as possible.
Stay home.
Stay home.
Just stay home. Why are you worried? Just 14, 15 days, just stay home, right? It's not going to go on any longer than that. Well, of course, tell that to the kids, some of whom still aren't back in school. We have parents out there. I've seen them. I know you've seen them in the airports and other places with kids that are like 5 and 6 years old, have plastic gloves on and masks and face shields. And you still have people driving around in their cars by themselves with a mask on. We are trillions, and I mean trillions more in debt since the end of this thing. Our economy is absolutely in tatters. There's still a commercial real estate crisis coming. And after that will be a banking crisis as the commercial real estate market closes. Crashes, I guess I should say. Oh, inflation. Oh, what did you think that was from? Did you really think you could just press pause on an economy and fire up the printing press by the trillion and not have dire consequences? But they told you 15 days to slow the spread. They told you coronavirus would slaughter millions of Americans by July. I remember that. I remember it well. Don't believe anything they say. None of what you see is real. Hey, thanks so much for watching The First on YouTube. If you liked what you saw, go ahead and like and subscribe. You heard me. Like it, subscribe. You'll get a lot more of it and a lot more of me. Thanks.